So I've worked with National Canadian Film Day before. I've done different events with them and worked with some of the youth camps they've had with Real Canada. And I'm a filmmaker, so I am a big film enthusiast. I think it's almost impossible to not be one without the other. This year, when National Canadian Film Day was on the horizon, I got the emails, saying like, "Are you going to program something this year?" And I was like, "Yeah, but I don't know what," because I'm kind of at that place in my life where I don't really want to make an art showcase and program in that way. And wrestling locally has become like a really big thing and a big part of my life. And I thought about how to connect the two things, like how to connect this awesome wrestling community that Dan has sort of cultivated and sort of give something to them.
Clayton reached out to me. Clayton is obviously an avid supporter and heavy into films. He's also a huge supporter of North Bay Wrestling, Northland Wrestling, and in his own words, thought that this would be a good way to show support and embrace his two loves, and he decided, or he asked me if I'd be interested, and I said for sure, and next thing you know, I'm hosting it, so it's pretty cool. Northland Wrestling, we're still going strong. We are moving on to our third year. We've got an event coming up May 25th. It's Field Out Bang. It's going to be a pretty awesome show. We got a great lineup announced so far, still more matches to announce. If you're interested in Northland Wrestling, don't miss May 25th, because I talked about watershed moment in wrestling. May 25th would go down as a watershed moment in Northland Wrestling. It's going to be awesome.
So we have a short film called Wrestler, which is old 1960s documentary on the formation of wrestling culture in Montreal. And then we have Wrestling with Shadows, which is a feature documentary about Bret Hart, which I haven't seen since it first came out.
I believe that after the events depicted in Wrestling with Shadows, we're talking, of course, the Montreal Screwjob, that wrestling changed forever. I mean, it was a watershed moment, and 20 years later, I'm really looking forward to seeing it again, see if the film holds up, and see how I react to it 20 years later.
It's like almost like going on a journey through Canadian wrestling in a way. Yeah, it's going to be good.
I think it's important to document where we've come from so that we can remember where we've come from and to see how much we've changed and how much we've advanced. Not to get cliche, but those who forget the past are doomed to repeat it. I say, those who forget the past are doomed never to learn a damn thing. So I think it's very important to document. I think it's very important to celebrate Canadian film, Canadian history, Canadian wrestling. I think it's just important to hold on to our roots.
I think it's really great that the National Film Board prioritized this film, like 20 years ago, and had an Indigenous director. There are not a ton of Indigenous directors prior to the TRC recommendations in the last sort of 5 years of larger public movements that have taken place. The Northland Wrestling League, all the wrestling events I've been going to over the last couple of years have had a profound influence on my life. Not just being able to see wrestling in my own town, but to be able to see community come together around wrestling and build something that is exceptional, and it lasted more than 2 shows. I saw in some of the national broadcasts today for National Canadian Film Day that they were taglining us saying, "and professional wrestlers?" ? I'm sure it's just hype, but it also linked to specifically this on the out of the 10 things that they're announcing across Canada, which I was just like, what?
Over the next 100 years, Canadian film has remained true to this winning formula. Stories from a cool country that fire the passions. On April 17th, celebrate Canada by watching a great Canadian film presented by Real Canada.
Oh, I thought it went really great. We had a really good wrestling fan crowd. A lot of people that knew a lot of the history of what we were watching.
Personally, I loved it. Got a chance to see some of the old wrestlers that I used to watch as a kid. Loved Edouard Carpentier. Now I remember why I loved them so much.
I really liked our first film, The Wrestler. Seeing all those old guys from the 1960s. that was just, that was fun.
I think it's really important that we continue to honor the works that are made in Canada, and especially today when we had a screening here in North Bay of Wrestling with Shadows, where not only did we watch a Canadian documentary, but it was about a very famous and important Canadian icon.
I thought it was great. I thought I was very entertained watching both films. The one called Wrestle, or The Wrestler, was actually really cool to see. You know, wrestling back in the 60s, and featured Carpentier there, like, prominently. I never really saw too much footage on him, so that was kind of cool to see.
Well, I thought it was really amazing. And just to let you know, it's not Brett screwed Brett. Vince screwed Brett.
I loved watching two great Canadian documentaries about Canada and our role in the pro wrestling history of the world, I guess. Yeah, it was beautiful.
Well, all I really have to say is North Bay, Ontario, screening of Wrestling with Shadows. I was there when Brett screwed Brett, and all I got was this National Canadian Film Day t-shirt.